Good evening, good evening, good evening. This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Another day's journey, so glad about it and so grateful for you joining me this evening for another Real Talk. Obviously, we're coming to the close of Holy Week, and this week has been so amazing. I mean, going back to last Sunday, and the movie Jesus with our deaf community, giving leadership to that. It was amazing to see so many of you come out to watch a movie that was not designed for your consumption. I mean, we sat there and watched all of the actors sign the story. And what was interesting to me is how many subtle things about the story that I've read and that I've known, but that came alive because it was presented by the hard of hearing deaf community. Thank you so much, Sister Robin. Thank you, Reverend Leroy Miles, Reverend Blaine Newberry, for your leadership on that. And then, of course, the rest of the week, the play on Monday, baptism on Tuesday, the men getting ready for the Tough Mudder on Wednesday, Monday, Thursday service, and all the sons and daughters came home. Yesterday, the young adults did an amazing job helping us hear the 7 last words. And tonight, we're having another conversation, a conversation with a leader, but this also has some political candidate conversation implications because we are talking to the now sitting DA who is running for a 3rd term. And as you know, when we get to this moment, we'll always have the opponent have the opportunity to have conversation. And the goal is for you to know, to learn, to grow in your understanding of what's happening in Philly, who is handling what, and what the church can do to be a part of positive change and impact so that, as we believe, the kingdoms of this world will become the kingdoms of our Lord. So thank you for joining us tonight. And I want to introduce you to our DA, Brother Larry Krasner. How are you doing today?
Much better now that I'm here, Pastor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being a part of Real Talk. This is an opportunity for me to get to know you even more, even though you have been here for a while, and we have had opportunity to talk, to converse, to disagree, but I believe this, that we both want what's best for the people of Philadelphia. And so you're here again. You're here also because you're running for a 3rd term. What is the DA and why do you want to do it a 3rd time?
So the DA is the district attorney. That means the person who is elected, at least in Pennsylvania, elected for the purpose of conducting criminal investigations and criminal prosecutions, mostly the prosecutions.
Okay.
But we do get involved in some heavy investigations, things like shooting groups, homicides, heaven forbid, a serial rapist, things like that. We get involved in those cases as well. Why do I want to run again? At this point, I kind of feel like I somehow am lucky and it's my assignment. It's what I need to do. At 64 years of age, it's not clear exactly how I landed here, but I landed here.
Okay.
And these are troubling times. They're troubling times in terms of our federal government. They are troubling times in terms of a lot of things happening in our culture. But if we can come out of this safer, and we can come out of this with a system that is fairer, and a system that people trust because it's balanced, if we can make this country, this city, less violent, and also make it less incarcerated at the same time, if we can make sure that people in jail, the ones who need to be there a long time, did it, that they're not innocent people taking the place of a guilty person, then we have done something that will reduce the number of victims in the future. And even though that's not visible, it's incredibly important.
Thank you for that. And you just sort of went to the core. I live in the tension of pastoring grandmother and grandfather and grandson, great-grandson, and granddaughter. At times we've had disagreement because of and this is language that's not mine, but a way for us to locate this conversation, the liberal conservative stuff. And at times you have been critiqued as sort of very liberal to from some of us, it almost seems like people are not being held accountable. And so I live in the tension of listening to grandmothers and grandfathers want safer corners, and listening to young men on State Road refer to you as Uncle Larry because they believe that your policies are going to allow them to get in and get out. How do you negotiate that? And where do you think that is coming from?
That's a wonderful question, Pastor. I think part of it is coming from an American sensibility that we need to examine.
Mm-hmm.
I could take you to modern Germany right now,
Mm-hmm.
and you would find that for every 100 homicide victims they have 11. And for every 100 people we have in jail, they have 11. They have a society that is both safer and freer, and they have a horrific record of racism and violence. We go to Japan. Japan will have one fatal shooting this year. It's half as big as the United States. It will have about 12 shootings, but only one fatal shooting. Imagine that. You know, that this city right now has amazing reductions in crime. As of today, while we're recording this, we have 10 fewer crimes on this day than we've had in the last 50 years in Philadelphia. I don't say that to brag about it, because there's no question it ain't me. It's a whole bunch of people doing some things that are working. Pastor, we're just coming out of National Crime Victims' Rights Week. My office has placed a particular emphasis on this. We started out with about 29 people doing that kind of work as victim advocates. We then went to 58. We literally doubled it. It was necessary with what was going on. And we have spent a good part of the last year advocating for more funding for the victims' rights groups that are outside of the office, but do really incredibly important work in the community. We have to always keep our focus on victims, on survivors, and on doing justice for people who are involved. When we talk about 02 to 4, here's a vicious shooting group that operated between 60th and 64th Street. They're gone. They are shut down. We were able to say 02 to 4, go to the jail, as a way of trying to reach young people through social media. They're gone. When we talk about young bag chasers, this was a truly vicious shooting group. Well, we were able to say you've been convicted, because they're also gone. It is very, very important that we separate the wheat from the chaff, you know, as they say in houses of faith.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important that we are able, on the one hand, to be vigorous and modern in our enforcement of people who are tearing apart society, but on the other hand, we are able to see the potential in people who don't see a future and have been deprived, most of whom are actually good people. They just need an opportunity. The more we are able to support people who are inclined to do the right thing and to separate people who want to do the wrong thing, then the safer we will be. And my focus has to stay on preventing that next victimization. What has happened to victims and survivors is awful. We don't want it to happen again. The part that's a little challenging, though, is it's not visible. I can't name for you the people who won't be killed, who might have been killed a few years ago or under prior administrations. I can't name for you the people who won't be raped, who won't be robbed. I can't name them. We only name them when terrible things happen. But we have to remember that they are there. And if we are able to reduce their numbers, reduce that trauma, keep their community safer so even passersby are not traumatized, then we've done something important. If we look at other crimes, we see that in 18 categories and subcategories that are elevated by the Philadelphia Police Department, the standard categories. Well, we're down in 16 of those 18 categories. And this is after the United States experienced its best year on record for public safety improvement in 2024.
Okay.
So there's no question things are going the right direction. There's also no question it's not me. It is a whole bunch of people, from school teachers, sports coaches, clergy, and I don't say that to pander to you. I'm just saying it's real.
Yeah.
It is the unks on the block. It is the aunties on the block. But it's also people in government who understand the value of deep investment in prevention, and also in modern law enforcement that is scientific, that uses scientific tools to make sure we catch the right people, and we catch more of them than we used to. It's all of that coming together. It's community-based organizations, nonprofits, Mighty Writers, just one of them, Kensington Soccer Club, Icons, Day. There are so many of these organizations that have this incredible impact on the ground in their mentoring. It's. I mean, honestly, it's not so different than what you do for a whole lot of people. So what we have to do is what works, and what we have to do is what has integrity. And to me, that's incredibly important that we try to do both of those things.
Got you. Thank you for that. Now, I'd like to ask you about a program that I think I know about, but I'm not sure that I do. There are some people out here who have been hearing about opportunities for funding for their work through your office. Because again, you're right. There are a number of different things that are working. I would argue that our sports program and just getting young people off the street is a part of reducing violence. It's not always the programs that are specifically targeting getting guns or buying, but when you train up a child in the way that they should go, when you have positive programming, that does make a difference. But there are a number of people out there that are doing the work, men who care of Germantown. Every murder is real. I'm just thinking and calling some things off top of my head. Is there a way that organizations that have 501c3 that are doing the work but need help in funding can partner with your office? And what does that look like?
There is. We're actually very proud of something we started a few years ago. We take forfeiture money, that's basically money that came from drug dealers. It's either the proceeds of their crimes or it's the tools of their crimes, right? We take that money, we're not allowed to use it for our own salaries and our own expenses.
Okay.
So it must be reinvested into communities, and we have chosen to put it back into the communities that have suffered the harm from this type of activity. And we do it as follows. We give small grants. There's a reason for that. We give small grants to nonprofit organizations that are on the ground doing the work. They're all vetted. We don't want people taking that money to Vegas or going fishing. So it's all vetted. And the vetting process involves a very simple application to the Philadelphia Foundation. The email for that is grantmakingservices@philafound.org. My office is also happy to help with that. They vet the applications. We look at them. And over a period of several years now, we've given out about $4 million in grants that are usually between $5,000 and at the high end, $50,000. And what we have seen is not just that this really helps the mom and pop organizations that have been doing this work out of their pocket for years, where there's all of this heart and enthusiasm, but it builds their resumes so that they're able to turn around a year later and maybe, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania will now give them a $200,000 grant or a $300,000 grant. So it has had this this return on this small investment that's been very, very positive. And it also defies the usual municipal approach, which is nothing but big organizations with big budgets that we already know, right? And then it's usually a reimbursement system. None of that works for small organizations.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
This I think it's had an impact. The people who do that kind of work are incredibly valuable as mentors, as people who care deeply about the young folks they're working with. They have amazing achievements that are mostly unknown. And to the extent that we're able to keep doing that, that's what we want to do.
Got you. How do you respond? So, for instance, you were talking about Germany and Japan, and we often hear about our political officials going to other lands to see their approaches to dealing with drugs and violence. And part of the critique that would come out of the African American community is, while it's always good to learn from other places, none of those places have the unique struggle of the race conversation that is connected. And while I'm very clear, you've got in Germany, you got the Jewish thing, you've got, and there have been cultural struggles, but there's something very unique about the slavery narrative, the Black experience in America, that then causes some of us to say white liberalism needs to be real careful in how they respond to the Black issue in America. So it's important for us to understand, and these are my words, sometimes it feels more comfortable to deal with white racism that comes from the old sort of Southern white strategy that at least I know you don't like me, and that's sort of coming on the far right. And then sometimes the white liberalism from the left masks itself in love for us, but it is a very condescending approach. I say all that to say, help us understand how you understand the Black experience in this conversation and can be sensitive to that.
Understood, and I actually agree with all of that. I
Okay.
do not consider myself the best person to speak to the Black experience
Yeah.
because, believe it or not, I'm white.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself to be the expert on that, so I will
Yeah.
try to be very careful with what I
Mhm.
say. There's no question that there's a unique history in the United States when it comes to slavery, Reconstruction, when it comes to the ongoing and massive discrimination that we see in the United States that is systemic and is feeling pretty comfortable right now.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of racism is digging its heels in. That is certainly a very large part of the caste system that we have. And of course, Isabel Wilkerson, who's a superb journalist, African American woman, has written about that.
Yeah.
It is a huge part of our caste system. It is not all of it. Our caste system is also about money. It's also about some other factors in society, opportunity, and so on. But what I would say is, while there are differences,
Mm-hmm.
there are still lessons that those countries can learn from us, and there are still
Okay.
lessons we can learn. Even if we just look within the United States, which consistently has the experience of slavery and the horrific history of how African Americans have been treated here. Here's a fact that is seldom heard. The homicide rate in states that voted Republican in the last presidential, over the last 25 years, has been much higher than the homicide rate in the Democratic states. It has been 133% is what it has been for 25 years. Out of those 25 years, you have been in more danger of homicide in a Republican state 24 of those 25 years. Now, that's something we don't hear very much
Right.
in the United States. The politics has all gone this sort of strange direction, and I suspect you know what I mean by the strange direction. But we can learn within this country too. There are programs that have been very effective in different states. There are programs that were very effective in Philadelphia. We need to look at them and see what we can take from them. It's never going to be an easy transfer from a different country or a different state.
Right.
But there's value in that, and we can learn lessons from it.
Thank you for that. Now, another question about partnering with you, and I'm not sure that I'm using the right word with saying partnering, but diversionary programs, meaning this young man is a first, or young woman is a first-time nonviolent offender. They're guilty, they did it, and jail might not be the best answer. Does that happen at your level? Is that where we can find alternatives to prison sentences or jail sentences? And how can churches be involved in that type of partnership to help with these young persons?
So many ways, to the extent that there is wraparound programming available for people who are being held accountable, but they're being held accountable in ways that will not make their future impossible. To the extent that houses of faith can provide that kind of programming or support it, that is enormous. The future really is made of accountability that is not always a conviction for nonviolent, less serious offenses committed by people who are basically law-abiding and made a mistake. That is the future. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is somehow in the United States we have taken the notion of accountability and the notion of jail and punishment as being the same thing. There are forms of accountability that require a lot of community service. That's work. There are forms of accountability that require completion of treatment or certain kinds of education or addressing underlying mental health issues that are very rehabilitative and corrective, and they're a lot of work. They're actually a lot more work than just sitting in a jail cell for 3 months with nothing to do, because the truth is we don't do much in jail. And then coming out to find yourself unemployable because you have that conviction, where you would have been employable if you had diversion. If you had completed this program, done a lot more work to complete it, been accountable, but been accountable without something that disabled you from housing, from education, and from a job. So for me, it's just a matter of understanding that accountability comes in multiple forms. If you're going to be shooting people and killing people, you're going to jail. And you may be going to jail for the rest of your life. And that's the accountability that you deserve. But if it is someone who has taken a wrong step, then in many, many cases, expanding diversion, which we have done, we've been very, very intentional about expanding it for young adults, expanding it for juveniles, and even expanding it for people who are older adults but have done something that is contrary to their true nature. When we do that, we see excellent results. We actually are seeing less recidivism, less new arrests among some people who come out of diversion than we are seeing for the same type of people after they're convicted and disabled from some of the constructive paths they could follow.
Thank you for that. One of the things that we struggle with in the community is the perception that if you have money and resources, then you can avoid jail time and avoid punishment. For females, if you are attractive, like attractive women get less jail time than quote unquote ugly women. That's what it seems. And we're watching lawlessness at levels in the government, and it feels as if these positions, your positions, are not going after the sort of systemic stuff. Now, does that rest with you in our political structure, or is there another place we should be putting pressure when we think of sort of systemic injustice? Or does your position sort of go at the individual lower level crime? And is there another place that we need to be looking to address the systemic stuff?
Well, the great Brian Stevenson has said you're better off rich and guilty than innocent and poor. And he has some remarkable achievements to back it up. And he's right. I mean, unfortunately, the system was not actually built to hold powerful people and rich people accountable. It's something that we have tried to change, including to the level of going after the richest man in the world at one point during this administration. But it is a deep flaw in the system, and it's only getting worse at the moment, because federal prosecution, while it has never been a big slice of the pie, it only handles 5 to 7% of all cases in the United States. Federal prosecution has been set up to go after insider trading on Wall Street. It has been set up to go after white collar crime by rich people. It has been set up to go after big pharma when they are generating unbelievable amounts of opioids that are going to addict the nation and make them the most prolific drug dealers of all time. Well, our federal enforcement system right now under the current administration in DC is basically gone. It now exists to punish people politically and to facilitate the J6ers with whatever they want to do next, which is a real challenge. So part of what we as local district attorneys need to do is we need to step up. We need to step up and try to be that accountability. We need to be fearless about this. We need to have some level of courage. It just doesn't make any sense in times like these after what we have been through. And I include World War II when I talk about this because my dad volunteered and served. People didn't hesitate about going to war. World War II, 19-year-olds were killed in World War II fighting for these rights. It is time for all of us to stand up and to make sure that we don't have some frankly too familiar version of what we had in World War II running this country.
Absolutely. And I thank you for that. I have a very simple question. I will own this. It's my question. I'd like to understand the difference when we start talking about hate crime, right? So obviously this week, and if you can't speak to it, please let me know. I struggle with the language. So on last week, our governor's mansion was bombed. And then they began to talk about, was it a hate crime? I'm wondering, what difference does that tag mean? So somebody bombed his house, and if we find out who did it, what should happen to that person, and why does something different happen if they find out it was because he was Jewish? Meaning, whatever he is, if somebody bombed his house, shouldn't they get the worst possible punishment, whether they did it because he's Jewish, or they did it because they don't like his policies, or they did it because they're crazy? Well, no, that's not fair. But they did it because they're just mean people and they like to set fires. Why does the punishment change based on that, the motivation? Help me with that.
Another fabulous question. Well, first of all, what happened to the governor and his family is unspeakable. It's unspeakable whether it's simply a lone wolf with mental illness, or it is someone who did it deliberately, around Passover for the purpose of terrorizing Jewish people, or whether it was more generally an assault on all Democrats. There's some evidence of that. And we don't, as I speak to you now, we don't know for sure the motivation. But I think there is a difference between terrorism and a single act of crime. There is a difference between a hate crime, which is terrorism, and in my mind it is, and a single act of crime, because it is not only directed at terrible harm to the individual, or maybe the individual and his family in the case of the governor, but it is directed at an entire category of people to terrorize them. It is to victimize all of them, not just one or some of them. We can look at the horrific history of lynchings in the United States. It was very, very clear, even in the overt statements of the Ku Klux Klan, it was very, very clear that the point wasn't simply to do something unspeakable to an individual. The point was to cause widespread terror. The point was control. The point was to use criminal acts in order to keep people in a certain position in their caste. That was the point. So there is a difference. I believe in the independence of the judiciary. There may be judges who don't feel like it's any different, that it boils down to the act more than the intention behind it. But I think, part of the reason we have separate crimes that are terrorism, we have a separate crime that is a hate crime, in addition to attempted murder, in addition to arson, in addition to assault. Part of the reason we have that is because some people in the law recognize it as involving a much larger number of victims and additional harm to those other people.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for helping me sort of process that my own self. I wanted people to get an opportunity to hear you, to understand your perspective. We who are living in the community at times have struggled with what feels very liberal. The liberal and conservative doesn't really work for us in the African American community, because we sort of fit in the middle. The average black church has a theology that is theologically conservative and socially liberal, and it makes us not fit in any camp. So we sound Republican and we act Democrat, and so we frustrate everybody wherever we show up. And so I get it, and but I think that's the role of the prophetic. I'm grateful that you've come to be a part of this conversation. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think people need to know about you, or for your reasons for running again, or what you intend to do, or just who you are, so that we can embrace that?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It has been a great conversation, which I truly enjoyed so far. Now I'm about to mess it up, but if I don't mess it up, it'll just stay a really great conversation. But this is part of it. I am running for another term. I would very much like to have that term because I feel like there's more work to do. And I think that we have made remarkable progress on safety and also on fairness and freedom, which is part of fairness. When freedom is possible without doing harm, we've been pretty successful with that. But to me, this election in Philadelphia, and the election day is May the 20th, is a lot bigger than whatever I do for the next 4 years. To me, this is an opportunity for us to save the country. Not in this election, but in the one that comes after. The midterm elections are coming. They will be in another year. And that, in my opinion, is the last opportunity for our country to save itself. If we are not able, as Democrats, which is what I am, or Republicans of goodwill, who do love their democracy, if we are not able to get the House of Representatives in D.C. back for the Democrats, maybe take a bite out of some of the Senate and make it more democratic. If we're not able to do that, then we will have a military coup. I don't think there's any doubt that at this point, through the words and actions of the president, we are looking at a military coup. The displacement of everybody in the military who would stand up to that, their replacement with people who are pure loyalists and have no experience, it is a pattern that's sweeping throughout his government. So I don't mean to be alarmist, because I'm actually a real optimist. I'm very hopeful that what we can do in the most important city, in the most important swing state, is in this election we can have a very high turnout. We can register a lot of people. Voting is habitual. Voting is scary until you do it, and then it's just fun. If we can get young people in particular, people who are reluctant voters, people who don't usually vote because they don't feel like government always is responsive to them, if they can show up when this is about criminal justice and vote here, which has happened in 2 prior election cycles when we ran before, if we can get them to show up and understand that they need to show up for the midterms, we can save this country. I really believe that. And so, I understand saving the country is of, the magnitude of Mount Everest, and my election is pretty much a, Midwest gopher hole. That's pretty much what that is. I understand that, and I mean that sincerely. To me, what matters is Mount Everest. It's not the gopher hole. But I see an opportunity here to use this as a vehicle to help my party get a lot more people involved in standing up and defending themselves against what is coming. We all have a chance here to turn to each other instead of turning on each other, to be united, and to be united against people who would be king, people who would be dictator, people who would divide us with their racism, with their efforts to take basically all resources from working class, middle class, and poor people and give all those resources to a short list of billionaires. We have this opportunity. And so I want people to understand that that's where I am. The most important thing for me is not whether I win this election or not, but the most important thing for me is that this country is saved. Our democracy is saved. That everyone gets to vote, that every vote is counted, and that election is final. And frankly, what we have here is a mess, and we need to straighten it out.
Thank you very much, DA Larry Krasner, for being with us on Real Talk today. Thank you all for joining me for another installment of this conversation. Obviously, tomorrow morning, you know what it is. It's Easter Sunday morning, or as we refer to it, Resurrection. We have 2 services in the morning, 6 a.m. and 10. Both of them are here at East. I'm looking forward to seeing you. I'm looking forward to closing out this week. As I've said all week long, I'm not mad at any other religion celebrating its truth. We felt the city celebrate Ramadan. We know that it was also Passover. We also want to make sure that people know this was Holy Week, and we want to make sure that people know tomorrow morning he got up with all power in his hand. And so thank you so much. We're going to have a word of prayer. We're going to pray for D.A. Krasner. We're going to pray for our country. We're going to pray for our city. And I'm praying for you and looking forward to seeing you in the morning. God, I bless you and thank you. Thank you for another opportunity to hear from someone who is serving our community, hear from someone who has a heart for people. And we thank you, God, for the opportunity to mirror conversation, communication, growth. And we come together today to pray for this country. Lord, we recognize that we are in some dark and difficult times, but we know you have a plan, projection, and purpose for all of us. And so, as Brother Larry Krasner has pointed out, he's an optimist, and we believe that as well. And so, God, into your hands we place this conversation, this country, and we ask that your will be done. Now, as we go throughout the rest of our day, would that you go with us, stand by us till we meet again. We ask it through Christ, and for his sake we do pray. Let us all say, amen, amen. Listen, I love y'all much. Talk with you real soon. God bless you and God keep you is my prayer.